All right. I want to welcome everyone to today's session. I'm Michael Workman, director here at Resin Smart, powered by RTI, where we're tackling what every resin buyer already knows, that this market is stacked against you. And if you're still buying resin the way you did 5, 10, 20 years ago, you're bleeding margin and you may not even know it. But we're not here to vent too much today. We are here to talk about how you can flip the script and turn the game into your favor. And be sure to stay tuned at the end. We've got a special free guest, or a free gift, I should say, for those of you that have joined and signed up for our session today. Two guys that are going to help me facilitate this conversation we're lucky to have with us today, Kevin Makaru and Bill Bowie. Guys, you guys have decades of experience running large plastic procurement operations and have supported clients for decades here at Resin Smart RTI. Gentlemen, my experience is from the resin, compound side of the negotiation table. So take it easy on me today, okay? Are you guys ready to get started?
Yes.
Yeah, 40 years getting ready.
Awesome.
Took me that long.
Every day is a step in the right direction, Bill. So why are we here? Resin is obviously the largest cost for all of us here, in the largest component of your cost of goods sold. But I wanted to, really start with a story, Bill, on something you've mentioned for years here, as co-founder here of RTI. The value of half a penny. Would you mind, sharing a little bit about really what that means and how much of an impact it can have on your organization?
No, not at all. Thanks, Michael, and appreciate the opportunity to share with you today. Probably one of the greatest gifts I received early in my career was understanding and being taught and mentored the value of a half penny. My career started at Poly-America in the mid 80s. If you're not familiar with Poly-America, they're arguably one of the largest polyethylene purchasers in the world at this point, certainly in North America. Husky trash bags. And when I was sent there, the executive recruiter that sent me there said, "You're lucky. You're going to the Harvard of Plastics and you're going to get paid to get your MBA." And it was a really true statement. Stephen Ross, the owner, was a really good businessman, tough taskmaster, tough to work for, but he was recycling in the 70s, and not because it was cute and it might help the environment, which are all important things that I'm sure we'll get into on other webinars, but because if he knew if his input cost was lower than everybody else's, he would win all the way through to the retail shelf. That if he could start lower, then he would win all the way through. And if you think about a half a penny, that doesn't sound like much when you're talking about a truckload of resin or you're talking about one rail car. But when you start talking about multiple rail cars and multiple truckloads and elevated prices that we pay, it adds up to a lot of money. And I think you guys can speak to the fact that that's lost opportunity, because that's lost molds that you could have bought, or new machines, investment in your people. There's numerous ways that money held inside the business can be used to the advantage of the business. So it was a great start for me, great opportunity to learn the business.
Yeah, I'm a simple guy, Bill, and I think about the math. Half a penny a pound on 100 million pounds a year. I mean, we're still talking $500,000, right? And what that can mean for your operation. I mean, Kevin, we talked about a few areas that our clients are deploying money that they've saved in their operation. Can you speak a little bit to that for me?
Yeah, Michael. I mean, if you look at, saving that half a penny, it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you look at the ability to put that towards not just replacement parts, but advancements, it gives you a competitive edge, and our processors the ability to really outshine their competitors in the market space that they're in. So it is just not for maintaining the business, but actually giving them a competitive advantage going forward as well.
Absolutely. And it's all about a competitive advantage that, we're all trying to find our window into that these days. It's very important. We talked about the why. I want to talk a little bit about the pain points that we, all of our, processors have dealt with over the years. Let's stop pretending that the game is fair. If you're buying resin, you're really up against some very difficult things. Non-transparent market, indices that are tied, where your contracts are tied to that don't reflect real market transactions. Negotiating blind. You hear that you're getting the best price, but have no way to validate that. All in an environment where, teams are under-resourced. And that's been an issue, Bill, when you were getting started, and certainly is an issue now. To give a little bit more color to this, Bill, I'd love for you to tell the origin story of RTI and the Resin Smart program, and kind of how that came about from your experience at Doskasil, because I think it hits on a lot of these points that I just walked through.
Yeah, no, thanks, Michael. Again, fun to share. So the same guy that told me I get my master's degree from the Harvard of Plastics and get paid for it also told me there would come a day when I knew it was time to leave Polyamerica, and that day came. It's a very specific day. I could tell you a long story about that, but it just so happened that Doskasil Manufacturing and my partner today, Garland Strong, was facing some really tough competition in the marketplace. And Garland was president of Doskasil at that time, and he had heard through the grapevine that these guys really understood resin, and they used resin as an advantage. Well, I know that company, and if I said their name, probably most people on this webinar would know their name. And they were using resin. They were using it just like Stephen was in polyethylene. They were doing exactly the same thing in polypropylene, and they were hitting Doskasil pretty hard at the shelves. So he thought, I need someone to focus on resin. I happened to be looking for an opportunity to move. We took tens of millions of dollars out of Doskasil's business. And I want to stress, this wasn't a business that was struggling, because Garland ran the business for 5-7 years, and we went from 50 million to 100 million plus. It was a growing, dynamic, successful business. And I found that over the 28 years with RTI. In fact, we have a saying that those that need us the least use us the most. And the Resin Smart people you work for today, I know, believe the same thing. The smart people know that they should use you. But while I was at Doskasil, I would ask resin buyers and do research myself to find out how much could I understand about the market, and how do I do that. And I would ask resin buyers when we go to lunch or have a meeting, if you take 10 resin buyers, how many really understand the dynamics of the market and the dynamics of the resin they're buying, and all the factors around that, from oil and gas and global economics and political events and everything that impacts a resin price. How many understand that, and what are the opportunities to understand that? And to a person, it was 4 to 5 people have the opportunity to really understand and dig into that. And even those people are the people I just mentioned that use Resin Smart the most. The ones that know that can be their advantage. So I grabbed Garland after Ben Doskasil decided it was time to hang up his hat, and said, I think there's an opportunity here to help people, to make a difference, to level the playing field when you're dealing with large geopolitical organizations that have footprints around the world, and you're going in that afternoon to negotiate with them. And that was the start of RTI and Resin Smart. Help the buyer.
Help the buyer. That's absolutely spot on, Bill. And the buyer still needs help today, right? I mean, back when you were getting started, Bill, I mean, the access to information wasn't nearly the same. The internet maybe wasn't around yet. Here we are now in today's time, where I would argue that there's perhaps too much information, and certainly untrustworthy information that's out there. Kevin, I want to get your take on some of these pain points, right? I mean, let's talk about the elephant in the room. June polyethylene market, right? We have 2 of the largest price reporting agencies that a lot of your contracts are tied to, taking the market up 3 cents a pound in polyethylene in June, when the market didn't do that. I guess I'll put it that way. Kevin, what do you think? Sounds like this has been around for a while, and it's not changing anytime soon.
No, and you brought up a good point. Sometimes they're not even in alignment on their estimated settlement, and then somehow they sometimes estimate the same at the very end of the month. So what we also see is the conditioning of the marketplace by the suppliers, who put out letters, for example, in June, everywhere from 3 cents to 7 cents. So there's a whole range, and some may ask themselves, how do they know what's happening, for example, in July's settlement when they're putting the letters out in June. So they're not based upon fundamentals as they exist today. It's estimated forecasted values. And there's a big range. So there is a lot of confusion that is put out for conditioning the market, what may happen.
Absolutely. That's well said on the conditioning comment there, Kevin. And the last thing I want to just dig into a little bit is the under-resourced teams component. I'm thinking through one of our clients, injection molder, that we recently talked to, and he was telling me how buying resin is perhaps his fifth or sixth job. He's also in charge of making sure all the materials arrive. The boxes. He buys the uniforms, right? And not having time to deploy to this is a real challenge. What do you guys see in terms of how you can manage to get this done in your day that's filled up with a lot of other things?
Yeah, from my perspective, I can tell you that you go back to the Daskasol story. The procurement manager before Garland brought me into Daskasol was buying paper clips, envelopes, stationery. I mean, he was buying everything, colorant. And then in the afternoon, he has to negotiate with Exxon, who's made calls all morning, has price points from across the globe. It's a real issue for procurement. It always has been. And even though in some cases there might be more of a focus on resin now, it's typically, like you said, it's the fifth or sixth thing on their list of things they've got to do. And even if it's the only thing, then I would challenge what information sources do you have? They haven't changed all that much in those 40 years. There maybe, as you mentioned, there's the internet now. And I hate to admit that there wasn't when I started. Don't like, yeah, no, thank you. Appreciate that. But while some things have changed and there's more access, what is the access? And that's where I think you get into some of the points you've made about follow the money and et cetera. But it's still a lot of balls for a procurement person to juggle.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit more, Bill. I kind of want to recap real quick. It's not bad luck. It's not that you're doing anything wrong. Buyers are getting squeezed because of how this system has been built. And I want to dig into a little bit more on what's going on behind the scenes before we talk about what we can do about it. So the system being built against you, suppliers using pricing indices that they know how to influence, the indices lagging the real markets, and let's face it, buyers don't really have a lot of better alternatives. Bill, you made a great point about follow the money, right? The market being opaque, indices benefit the suppliers. Can you share a little bit more on that follow the money? Because I think that's so instructive here as well as in a lot of things in life.
Yeah, no, I certainly can. And really before that, I think going back to the origin story and talking about the market in itself, it's non-transparent. And one of the things that still bothers me is that we're so non-transparent. How come I can know what orange juice is trading for today, real time, call it up on my computer right now while we're talking, pork bellies, oil, gas, I can find out the transparent price of all those materials. And yet I have plastics over here that I can't, that I have to rely on an index who serves two masters. Look, I'd never want to run an index. Garland and I have talked about it. I wouldn't want the job, frankly. But you're making money on both sides. You're saying you're unbiased, but you're getting paid by the buyers who read your reports and by the resin producers that use you for analysis and projects that they have. You look at the website and talking about the internet, and if you really trace back to a number of the sources people are using, they're secondary buyers. They're people that are selling resin that then are reporting to you what's going on, they say, in real time in the market, but they're not unbiased and they don't pretend to be. They're there to sell resin. RTI happens to be the only organization that I'm aware of that is completely biased, and we're biased for the buyers. And that's why we started the company. That's the challenge that people still face today, is finding that either unbiased, that's truly unbiased, that isn't being paid by two masters, or someone that's biased for them. It's a tough market. Tough market.
Tough market is a great way to put it, Bill. And what makes it even tougher is that, as I mentioned, you're doing a lot probably too much with too little. Most procurement organizations that I've come across don't have a large team of internal analysts dedicated to market intel. They certainly don't have the same resources as some of those very large, some of the largest companies in the world that they're negotiating against. And so, what often happens is decisions are being made that can be $1 million decisions on gut feel, scraps of info, right? Not the full story. And that is not as ideal.
Yeah, you think about it, Michael. A resin salesman walks in to call on you, and he or she has the whole organization behind them. And what's the name of the company? It's Dow, it's Exxon, it's Chevron, it's these huge multinational corporations that have hundreds, if not thousands, of data points on real-time transactions, not only that they personally sold in the last day or week or month, but also all those salespeople around the globe that work for that organization. All that data is being fed in. What have you got? What have you got? You got an index that's reporting last month or what happened? You got a website that you can go to that's trading cars on one side of the website and telling you what the market's doing on the other. I mean, it's a really tough task for resin buyers, and that part hasn't changed in 40 years. It hasn't gotten any easier.
Well, and another thing that hasn't changed is because of that, you end up being reactive by design. And you may want to be proactive and pivot, but the whole thing is set up in a way that prevents you from doing so. And so those are some of the things that we're really solving here, with the Resin Smart program. I want to talk now about what smart buyers are doing differently. Uh, Again, we talked about the rig system and not having enough resources. Even the most experienced resin buyers can get burned in that type of environment. Some of the ways that smart buyers are fighting back and doing things differently are leveraging independent buyer-centric data, right? We talked about the need to evaluate actual transactional numbers, which is something we have as part of our portfolio here at RTI, and being able to be predictive and act proactively by taking forecast information that is reliable and get out in front of purchases, right? Timing the market so that you can beat increases, being able to be armed with the data to prevent increases to your business, right? Like cost avoidance, and then being able to negotiate with confidence rather than assumptions. I want to take a moment to say that if you have questions, I should have said this at the start, please drop them in the chat. I am going to ask a specific question now while we pivot to what we can do about all of this madness. I want to ask, do you currently use any kind of predictive or independent market insights to guide your purchasing? Drop any answers in the chat while we're waiting for folks to pop their chat open. Bill, Kevin, anything you wanted to add there on what smart buyers are doing differently?
Yeah, Michael, I think a lot of smart buyers have understood, especially since COVID, you need to have dual sources of supply when possible. You cannot have a supply chain that is only one supplier centric. Now, understanding that the cost could be prohibitive in certain industries, maybe medical, for example, and that doesn't mean that the groundwork should be laid in advance for having that. Because if your one supplier does have an outage and you only have that one specified resin, you run into challenges. And we saw that during COVID. So that is something that should be an activity that's kind of ongoing as continuous improvement for your supply chain.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
of course, leverage and pricing negotiations, of course.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. Thank you for sharing that. Looks like most folks are shy today, which is okay. Looks like there are a few folks out there using some sources, which is great, right? It's important that you're out looking for data and then trust but verify. I want to talk now about some small shifts in your procurement effort that can yield some big returns. And I want to go back to you, Bill, for that. You've got, your 3 items. I'm sure there's a better way. Maybe we can trademark your 3 philosophical pillars of what to do in your procurement organization. Can you walk us through those And I think that might facilitate a good conversation.
Yeah, no, thanks, Michael. And really, these are the points that right dovetail right behind what Kevin just said. Uh, Number one is to build your network of trusted sources. We have a saying at RTI that's been around for many, many years: talk to many, buy from a few. Number two is expand your supply base. To Kevin's point, now I know medical can make that difficult, and we can talk about that in more detail. And in three, expand your resin categories. Where can you use different materials that you might have not uh, made an effort to look at in the past, that opens up new avenues of information to you? And there's a plethora of examples on all three of these, but it's really about building your network, talk to many, buy from a few, expand your supply base, and then expand the resin categories you can use where possible.
Absolutely, Bill. Thank you for that. And I know one way we can, or that a lot of folks are looking to expand their resin categories today are, back to what you said earlier, Bill, with the sustainable resin options, using recycled materials, these types of things for, regulatory and environmental reasons, but also, because it is the right thing to do back when you were doing it, right? Before it was cool, I think was your vernacular. Kevin,
Yeah.
anything you wanted to add to that?
I think that kind of covers. I mean, it's really a couple of. I think you mentioned it, Bill, before. Is a three-legged stool, right? Those are the three pillars that you have to have within your organization to be successful and competitive on a long-term basis, not just short-term with one negotiation, but multiple years of good negotiations going forward.
Yeah, and again, back to your point, Kevin, I think that COVID taught us that even in the medical area, where it's very difficult to do anything different or new, um, we've faced those over the last 28 years more than once at Resin Smart RTI, and we found creative ways. One creative way is to talk to develop relationships with the secondary market, whether you buy in that market or not. They're open to the fact that they can talk to you, because at some point you might be a buyer in the secondary market, and they'll have conversations with you that builds that database of information you're using when you sit down with your supplier to have a conversation. Number of creative ways to expand in each of those three areas.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about another strategy. This one, very frustrating to me as my experience on the sales side, because I lived people doing this to me, but it's an absolutely beautiful tactic. The idea of taking your supplier out to lunch and paying, the idea of pattern interrupt, Bill. Can you share a little bit on kind of how you approached that and why it was important?
Yeah, it's really an effective tool. Historically, I don't know that it's as rampant or as common today as it was back when I got started, and the going to the Masters tournament and somebody paying for your tickets to get to the Masters, and going to ball games, and all the opportunities that a buyer has to build relationship with a supplier, and that's critically important. But what pattern interrupt offers to do is level that playing field. Maybe have your seller a little bit on their heels, because every Tuesday, the third Tuesday of every month, I go in and I meet with Bill, and we meet in his office for an hour, and we talk about the market, and maybe we don't get the deal done, but then we go to lunch to Cracker Barrel, and Bill has 2 eggs fried and hash browns and sausage, and I get my salad, and then we do the deal. And this month when I went in, Bill said, "Hey, let's not go to lunch today. I've got the president of the company coming in to sit with us, and we're going to go up to his office and just talk about the market. He wants to understand what's going on," or the CFO, or the plant manager, the operations lead. Now there's a new person in the room, and hey, you know what? I'll buy lunch today. Let's go to lunch, and we'll take John from operations with us. It just changes the dynamic and creates more of a level playing field, in that now you can have a more open, I believe, conversation. It works wonders. It's just phenomenal to see it in action.
Couldn't agree more with that. Kevin, I know you've got a few pattern interrupts from your past. Do you want to share maybe your favorite one that you was your go-to?
Yeah, one of our suppliers quite a while ago asked us to go for a golf outing, and my boss obliged, and we had a couple team members come. I was one of them. And he asked the question before we kind of got settled on the first tee, and he said, "You know what?" Said to the supplier, "How much is this golf outing really costing me? How much is this costing my company?" And it really threw the supplier back because really, there's some bonding, there's some synergies there, understanding, camaraderie, and so forth. But at the same time, there's a customer and a supplier. And you have to understand, like Bill was saying, level the playing field, make them start thinking a little bit differently about the relationship than I can take them on a golf outing and maybe I don't have to give them back as much during contract negotiations. So it is a pattern not interrupt that I think works well is asking those questions, sometimes in a very polite manner, of course.
In fact, Michael, if I could, I think a very effective pattern interrupt is, I know with Resin Smart clients, that when the 3 cents is solid, Kevin tells them, take the 3 cents, shake their hand and say, thank you, have a good month. So often a procurement person thinks they've got to argue and they've got to push back. You talk about pattern interrupt, because now the next month when they want another 3 cents and Kevin says, don't take the 3 cents, and here's 10 reasons why you shouldn't take the 3 cents. Now he knows you're serious because you didn't fight the one that really didn't matter, and he had that 3 cents nailed. You fought the one that deserves to be fought, and that changes the dynamic.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point, Bill, because really, at the end of the day, there's justified increases. And, we're all in business. They're in business, we're in business. And, hey, you know what? We've got to help you out. You got to help us out. And there's going to be times where we need help as an organization. And, and that's what you need to have the even playing field relationship.
Yeah, well said, guys. Well said. I want to pivot now and talk a little bit more about, some examples of and how top buyers are outperforming. 19% year one cost savings is the data from RTI engagements, over $1 billion saved over the years. Really the data and the insight can be not necessarily nice to have, but it can be the difference between being successful and profit and pain. And I want to just give a couple of examples of that. I'll start with one of our blow molding customers was actually one of our customers originally back in decades ago. Bill, you'll remember them. Decided to chart their own course after we had saved them quite a bit of money. And in the last couple of years, we got reintroduced to the team there, new leadership. And within 90 days, we helped them save 7 figures with no change in resin. And, it was a story that a lot of us are dealing with out in the industry, right? That the pricing got a little bit away from them after COVID, right? Maybe a little bit too much reliance on, the trust that was built through that exercise. Listen, we're not saying that getting taken care of during COVID doesn't mean anything, but we're in a very competitive world right now. And I think that's the conversation needs to change. And, that's a great example of the idea of price drift, which Bill, Kevin, I know you guys have seen on a day-by-day basis.
Yeah, Michael, I'd also say there's events that do happen in every industry with capacity expansions and contractions. And when additional volumes come on board, that means that the market is going to be well supplied more than they were several months prior. And what does that mean for pricing? That should mean that if the demand is not up to the volume that's coming online, that the pricing should be flat to down. And I would argue a lot of times down, depending on the grade of resin and the specifics.
Absolutely. Bill, I'm going to ask you to tell another story and an example of, we talked about half a penny a pound and the impact that can make to your organization. Well, what if it's a lot more than half a penny a pound that you save? And would you mind telling that story, Bill, about the gas cans?
No. I was hoping we'd have time for that one. It's one of my favorites. And before I start, let me tell you, this company was just like Doskasil. They weren't in trouble. They were growing like a weed. They had a strong business early in Resin Smart RTI days. We called on this customer. It was somebody that Garland had known through the retail environment. And they vetted us. They took us out. The owner had a ranch, and he took us out into a little wood cabin with his executive team. There were probably 5 or 6 of them. And there was also, I'll say, beer involved. And they wore us down. The goal was to get us to slip up, to make a mistake, to do something that allowed them not to go forward because they thought they had a fine business and they were doing okay. And at one point in that conversation, the buyer mentioned, he said, look, my supplier has been my long-term supplier. And he tells me I negotiate hard. And he was he was that typical, pretty rough procurement guy. He wasn't afraid to tell you where he stood. And he said, my supplier tells me I buy like 100 million pound buyer. Well, they were about 25, 26 million pounds at this point. They hired us. We passed the test in the wood cabin out in the woods, and they hired us. And we had one meeting with their supplier, and they dropped the price 12 cents a pound. Changed that company's history and trajectory. They reinvested in a whole new product line of goods. They expanded their existing plant. They built a second plant for the new line of products that they came out with. It revolutionized their business just as it did at Doscasile. Great story. Long-term customers saw the value immediately. And the point of that story is that you've got to have that network to check yourself and to check your supplier. There might have been other suppliers at 100 million pounds that were at his price. That's the really scary part of that story.
That's the scary part. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, great story. Thanks for letting me share that, Michael. It speaks to that point about having that network broad and deep.
Yeah, I mean, a great way of building your network can be surrounding yourself with, trusted resources, like you mentioned earlier, Bill, but that, you get the advantage working with the RTI team of the combination of all of our networks that have been built over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And then this getting your time back, right, is a huge advantage. Being able to, have these calls compartmentalized and then, really add a lot of value, and then sharpening your skills. I'm going to tell a quick story that's going to show my homerism with my football team, right? I went to Michigan. I'm a huge Tom Brady fan. Tom Brady, we can all say with some confidence, he's at least in the top 3 greatest quarterbacks of all time, if not at the top. Expert at his craft, right? But he engages experts all along the way to help him get better. He's well known for that, right? He's got his guy that helps him eat the right things. He's got his guy that helps record his throwing motion to make sure he's just putting the right amount of torque, spin on the ball to get the right amount of velocity. He engages experts to get better. Kevin, I know you're not the biggest Tom Brady fan, but that's okay. There's examples of that in other professions as well.
Sure. Michael Jordan, everybody knows that obviously he's the top of his game, and he was for many years. And he has coaches, he has mentors, and that's the only way you get to that is you continuously learn and you have people around yourself giving advice to get better. And that goes for any sport.
Absolutely. I did see the questions that come in. We're going to quickly pivot to the tool and show you our new data analytics platform, and then I'll come back to the questions. But Bill, did you want to sneak something else in there?
Yeah, just one more point, because what you and Kevin just talked about goes back to that whole that at Resin Smart and RTI, what we've always seen historically is those that need us the least use us the most. Tom Brady would have been a great quarterback anyway. I got to give you that. I'm not a Michigan fan, sorry, but TCU, all I can do there. But the best of the best want to be better, right? They want to rise to the top, and that's a Tom Brady. That's a Michael Jordan. And that's what you guys offer those resin suppliers to rise to the top. So thank you.
Yeah, I know I risked alienating the audience with my Tom Brady story there, but I couldn't resist. So let's talk a little bit about Resin Smart and what it was built for. It really was built for one thing, and it was built to give the buyer a competitive advantage in the market that, like we discussed ad nauseum today, that's been rigged against them. And so I want to pull up the tool, and Kevin and I are going to talk through a little bit of the value that it provides. And while I do that, look at that even faster than what I was practicing this morning. Can everybody see the screen here? Somebody give me a thumbs up. Bill, Kevin, perfect. All right, so we developed this tool to really help you, the buyer. And the idea here, feedstock prices, it's changed day over day. You can get a quick snapshot of that. Executive summary, what is happening in the markets weekly in resins? We provide a quick snapshot so that you can understand the so what. This is for you, the buyer, but this can be something that you can pass up your organization to your executive team, your leadership, on what's happening and then what to do about it, for all the different commodity resins that we have here. Uh, Kevin, I want to talk a little bit about polyethylene. I know that's near and dear to your heart. So let's go into the polyethylene dashboard here. Perhaps we start with feedstocks. That's typically how we start conversations with our clients.
Yeah, if you on the feedstock dashboard before we can go to the general one, which and just to the left on the tab, just kind of has the basic understanding where the market is for each commodity. So just going to be different feedstocks and so forth. And there's a updated cadence of this, typically daily for a lot of the commodities. So, and that's a quick snapshot to see what trends, where everything's at. And then as you're on the other dashboard there, gets more granular. You can essentially look at different types of commodities, and you can look at do some analysis, moving averages. 30, 60, 90 for those type of commodities and see generally where they're headed and tracked and so forth. So that's a good way to kind of get into details and do some trend analysis as well for the upstream materials that go into the various resins.
Thank you for that, Kevin. I know one story I want to quickly share that one of our clients has used this information for. This happens all the time in the world of plastics. Vendor was supposed to be meeting with them on a Wednesday, called about 30 minutes and said on a Tuesday, hey, I'm 30 minutes away. Oh, there's a scheduling issue, but I'm almost to your plant. Well, in a normal environment, that buyer may not have had the time to go out and find different feedstock sources, pricing information. You're able to find that here within the tool and prepare for that meeting and come out with the right outcome. I want to show a little bit of our most recent tool that's just been in, and looking backwards is one piece of it, right? Looking back in the past and keeping up with the day-to-day transactional pieces, but looking forward is really important. Want to show the polypropylene forecast here that we have in the tool now, as well as the price history for the last year plus with quarterly insights. Our clients are using this information for a lot of reasons. This time of year is P&L development season for the next year. At my prior company, we called that annual operating plan, or AOP, for 2026. What's critical in that process, right? It's being able to predict with confidence what is going to happen with your largest component of cost of goods sold. Here at RTI, we've been doing this for 28 years, and clients have stuck around for the reliability of our 30, 60, 90-day forecasts. Well, here we have an expanded version of that out into the future, which we're very excited about. Anything to add there, Bill, Kevin, on the importance of forecasting to a plastic processor organization?
Well, I would say that, there's a lot of events that may happen throughout for example, the second half of this year. And we do update the commentary as well as kind of the ability to kind of look at other things, data points that come online. It's a combination of qualitative and quantitative majority, and the qualitative, along with data points from all our touches to our clients. So that's kind of the methodology that we put into the tool. And a lot of our companies may just have a forecast at the end of the year or in the fourth quarter for the full year. In ours, it is definitely updated with relevant data, so it doesn't stay the same year over year. We do make sure that we are putting relevant data because there's always something that's going to an outlier that's going to shake up the market. We want to make sure our clients understand what does that mean to the forecast going forward.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kevin. And we've got a good question that's come in from Esteban on the pricing data. Is that coming from our clients? I can take the first stab at that, and then Kevin, please add with any color. So we do have visibility, of course, into our clients' transactional uh, purchases, right? It's over 3 billion pounds of net transactional prices that we see on an annualized basis. There are other prices that go into that are not client facing, right? It's transactions that we see within our networks that are what I would classify as more third party to really uplift and increase the sample size. Kevin, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, in general, we look at the data set that Michael was mentioning, in addition to kind of what the trends in the industry, upstream feedstocks and so forth for the forecast. We don't just look at just transactional prices. They're a very important part of it because there's a whole range of clients out there and suppliers or processors. Some are buying pretty good, and some of them we're working on to buy better. So some of them have a little bit more leverage because of the volume. Some have less leverage. So it's a good, what we call a fair price for people to be able to, or processors to buy at.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Kevin. And we have reached the end of our pre-prepared content. We do have a few other questions that have come in, and I'm going to start with those. But now would be a great time. If you have additional questions, please add them in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can here. I want to start with actually the most recent one that came in. Question around what negotiation levers have you found most effective in convincing resin suppliers to drop prices in a tight market without damaging long-term relationships? That is a balancing act, of course, and something that we really think through and care about at Resin Smart. We don't want you to be in a position where you can't get your resin anymore, right? That's a reality of what can happen if you push too hard. But Kevin, do you want to maybe start with your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think Bill mentioned, I mentioned as well, balance your supply chain and make sure that you have options. Whenever possible, have options. And even if it's something, situation where in the past people say, well, it's never been done like that. Have somebody in the continuous improvement part of your organization say, look, this could actually save us a lot of money towards working capital to have advantages in the future with a competitive advantage. So let's look this upstream and say, okay, do we have the resources to start those qualifications? Or do you have a resource like RTI to give you maybe some competitive resins that could be to your advantage to trial? And that's what we do help our clients out with as well, is giving them comparable resins to try based upon properties that they're looking for in the product. So that's another kind of touch that we have in our client meetings as well. Bill, would you agree?
Yeah, no,
Well,
Kevin, well said. And I think I'd go back, what you started with is competition is king, right? Competition is king. Now, that isn't always possible, and not knowing everybody's, certainly the person that asked the question, their specific situation, but create a story. If you want to have a conversation with your supplier in a tight market where resin prices are going up, what's your story? And communicate your story. Why is that extra difficult for you? There might be a number of reasons, from tightness, from your market changing, any number of reasons that you can get your supplier to give you one, to let you have one. And that's one of the things I know over the years that all of us have prided ourselves in understanding where our clients at and what their needs are. And you can get past a tight market. Not every time, but you can, and you can build a story around that to position yourself to fend off that price increase.
Yeah, I think the story is a great analogy, Bill. I mean, we used to talk about that as well on the supply side, is to have the story. Sometimes the story needs to be edited. Sometimes it needs additional authors providing some perspective, and that's where you're back to your network and including the right trusted network of folks to help you craft that narrative in the right way becomes so critical. That's what I was going to add to that. And I love the story.
No, that's right. And one of the best stories is look where we're going. The conversation about, I need help today on this price increase, but I want to show you, Mr. Supplier, where we're going. And we want you to come with us. Again, selling the story.
Yeah, and having alignment between what you purchase today and what you purchase in the future is something
Mm-hmm.
that we talk a lot with our clients about. Sometimes that gap is real in organizations, right? You might have a planner that is, buying the polyethylene that's been spec'd on this job, and you might have a different group that is negotiating the new projects that are coming in. Building that interface within your organizations can be really important, and sometimes it takes a third party to help you set that up, right? And that's what
Yeah,
we do.
you brought up a good point to about aligning strategy with an organization. A lot of times we see that new projects for additional volume are just given to the current supplier. And that just, if you talk about an opportunity to save money on a new opportunity that's out there for your product, engage with a different supplier and just qualify something up front. So sometimes in the very competitive markets where you're not able to change too often because of specification requirements, maybe it's OEM or medical and so forth, start a new project with a different supplier. Just don't give it to the current supplier. And then you will find if the relationship will be a little bit more balanced over time.
Mm-hmm. Great point, Kevin. And not knowing their situation. As a procurement person, can I go to my CFO and say, we really need to get past this price increase? Could we adjust our terms? Could I offer my supplier that I'm going to pay this a little bit earlier? Can that help me fend this? I mean, there's just countless ways
Yes.
when you build your story and dig in that you can fight the battle.
Thank you, guys. I think we got some good answers there. I want to hit this next question. Are there contract models or price change mechanisms that you've seen that protect buyers better during volatile periods? I've got my thoughts on that, but I probably should save them to after the buyers answer that question.
Michael, I would say that if you look at more of a net transaction scenario of what it's really costing this supplier in volatile times, it can go up, it can go down. But in general, what is the average net transaction? I think that will give you an indication of where things are at. For example, polypropylene has a large swings in volume due to many reasons. But looking at what the net transaction is there, looking at timing of buys is a good strategy as well in a very volatile market. But you have to be able to get the information to know when to buy, how much to buy, and then there's working capital considerations as well with your individual companies, how much they want to buy and hold for a hedge. There's different situations. Ethylene would may be a little bit different than polypropylene, but in general, there's different strategies out there. But net transactions, see how much it really costs them to make the resin.
Yeah, I smiled so big, Michael, because what I am is a resin buyer, always have been. Happened to start Resin Smart and RTI, but that just meant that I was helping multiple other resin buyers buy resin.
Right.
I've always been a resin buyer, and it's probably not the correct answer, but I want to settle my price myself with my supplier every month. I don't want a third party to tell me what my price should be. Now, I know that's not always practical in today's world, and the suppliers expect us to tie ourselves to an index. But I know a number of cases where, okay, Mr. Supplier, we'll use the index, but we also have in the contract that we're going to have a conversation about the settlement of that index. If you're going to force me to use it, we're going to have a conversation, because behind me, I have this organization that's helped feeding me with the correct information on what the market did. And we're going to have to adjust plus or minus off that index from time to time. Best way is to settle at the end of the month based on what somebody whispered in my ear, what I should do.
Well said, Bill. Yes, that is absolutely what I would answer that as well. We got another time for a couple more questions. Very timely question on how do you handle challenges like tariffs, retaliatory duties, or military conflicts? Geez, I guess we have all three of those maybe happening right now. Any tips that you guys have on how to tackle those?
So I think you really have to look at what is really affecting the price of your specific commodity. For example, PT, there's a large amount of imports into North America. Other commodities, for example, PE, there's a lot of exports. So what is your exact impact on that commodity? A supplier may just say, oh, well, it's tariff related. That's why. But that market, for example, PE has a lot of capacity. It's not affected by tariffs. So people can really go back and forth on what the actual impact to the price would be. So you have to understand that, and we do discuss that within our calls, what people should be kind of what we're looking out for, and trade routes, issues with global conflicts and so forth. Those are all things that are tied to a global market like polyethylene, for example, or PET.
Yeah, I mean, what I would add to that is I know that from the producer, the supplier side, when any of those events happen, or if there's a eclipse in the sun, and we're all looking for reasons to have a price being put out there, price increase letter being put out there. I think what you said, Kevin, is look at the data, right? On the import export side, you can go out and look at USITC data. I mean, we have that import export data within the Resin Smart platform. But right there, you could see very clearly the impact on polyethylene market, right? We know half of the market is exported, but where and right, what impact are those tariffs actually having? With the right data, you can challenge those statements that are being made, right? And hey, maybe there isn't a tariff impact, and here's why, X, Y, Z reason.
That's exactly what you both said is exactly right. That you got to get through the noise. You got it, and that takes time. You mentioned earlier, Michael, about time. Look, as the old guy in the room, you appreciate how valuable time is. The older you get, the longer you've been working, you realize how valuable time is, and how much time do you have to get through all that noise. Those things that just were rattled off: wars, tariffs, political changes, all those things. We can't stop the market. The example would be a hurricane. RTI can't stop when the industry shuts down because there's weather coming in on the Gulf Coast. But what we can do is help you prep, knowing it's coming. Can we buy a few cars extra? Can we position some cars in a different place with our supplier so they're able to get to me later on? There's all kinds of strategies that can help you buffer what's coming at you. But get through the noise.
We have time for at least one more question. We got a good one here from Tomas. Do you have different buying strategies for producers versus distribution or the broker network? I mean, I know the answer already is yes, but it depends on your business, of course. But Kevin, Bill, I'd love for you to elaborate on some of those nuances that are different there.
The answer is yes. If you're buying through distribution, for example, your volume for that specific commodity is not great enough to go direct. You're going to have a relationship. However, there is a lot of companies that typically distribute the same product. Do you know who those networks are, and have you kind of vetted that in a bid? So distribution RFQ. A lot of people have not even thought about that. They do it for their main spends, but that is a strategy that you could do to kind of keep that in play. When you're talking about your main suppliers, now LyondellBasell, ExxonMobil, a lot of suppliers are not used to going through RFQs. I hate to say it, they just assume they're going to have a discussion one-to-one, and they're not comfortable with the fact of doing a blind bid for tens of millions of pounds of resin, because it's kind of locked up to them. So getting off their comfort level and balancing the relationship where it should be, that is a good opportunity. So a bid process, but it's a little bit different with this distribution network as well as the primary suppliers. Bill, would you add anything to that?
No, exactly right, Kevin. I would go back. I find myself going back and back. Talk to many, buy from few. To the point you just made, Kevin, even if you can't bid it out, maybe your product doesn't allow you to bid it out. Are you talking to those? Do you know who the other distributors are that have that resin? Do you talk to them? Even if you don't buy from them, do you talk to them? Do you talk to the supplier that actually makes the resin? If you're not large enough to buy from them, they'll have a conversation with you. If you ask that resin salesperson when they're going to be in town next, can I buy you lunch? I want to understand your product better, and I buy it through this distributor. You can invite the distributor to the lunch. Phenomenal meeting. So yeah, the first answer is yes, like you guys said, and then there's just a lot of different avenues to go down with on both sides.
I love you sneaking in a pattern interrupt there at the end, Bill, on inviting the distributor to the
I couldn't
lunch.
help it.
I know you couldn't help yourself, which is great. Listen, everybody, we're a minute over, and I really want to say again, thank you for joining us today and being a part of the conversation. As I mentioned earlier on in the call, for everybody that's joined and registered here, we're going to extend an offer of early access to our Resin Smart Base platform, as well as an invitation for a free consultation with our resin procurement experts, depending on the polymers that you buy. And so be looking for that via email after the event, and we'll be sending the recording out. And listen, everybody, have a great rest of the week. Remember, iron sharpens iron, build your networks, and get better every day in resin procurement. We really appreciate the time. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, guys.